Welcome back to the THNC podcast. I'm Jonathan. That's my colleague Mark. There, wherever he is. And we're here to talk about Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, the movie by the Daniels. That movie blew us away, both of us. I think we think it may be like one of the new reference standards for complex integral works, although we recognize it's not everyone's love language. And some people, famously Joyce Carol Oates, tweeted out that she walked out of it, couldn't stand it. And I've talked to other people, mostly older people who didn't like the film. But so I think it's a very complex work and not easy to grasp for certain people. But it's easier for young people because it's so much about the experience of being in an everything, everywhere, all at once field, which is sort of what the internet is, with social media and with cat videos and terrorism videos and horrors and joys and laughs and everything all coming at you just in this kind of chaotic cluster. So that's definitely an undercurrent of the film. The other thing that it really impresses us is that even though it seems like a work of utter chaos, it actually has an extremely clear through line, thematic through line that's very consistent through the entire film. So we're going to talk about that. This is the story of this middle-aged woman who's very unhappy. She's in an unhappy marriage with a failing business that she can't stand. She's overworked and she's not able to communicate with her daughter because there are big cultural field differences between her and her daughter, and she's living with generational trauma, and a lot of that is a very universal story, certainly especially I notice for Asian Americans who have that experience, that first generation shift from that culture to American culture. So all of these things are in the film, and yet the film is really Evelyn's journey through all these multiverses in order to come back and find herself. Sort of that comment that the purpose of travel is to come home and see where you're from with new eyes, and that's sort of what that's about. So I'll throw it over to you, Mark, and you can kind of talk a little bit, give us an introduction to what you think on this film, and then we'll try to unpack from there.
All right. Well, let me make sure I'm in the right universe here. So, okay, I'm here.
You might want to eat some chapstick and,
Anyways, I love this film. For me, it's shamanic cinema in its ultimate form. It's in shamanic traditions, the shaman travels between worlds in order to find healing, to find knowledge, and to find power. And they go to the upper worlds, they go to the lower worlds, depending on the tribal cosmology. But essentially, it's this traveling between dimensions that is transformative. And this film kind of captures that in a very visceral way. So you, the viewer, are kind of taken on this ride between worlds, and it's done very cinematically, very organically. Like you can feel the swirling and the effects. Like when she's shifting between worlds and realities, it's just like really you could feel it. Very strongly. As you said, it's very complex, and that complexity makes it hard to penetrate for some people. And that's okay. But beyond that, I want to say one thing here. Every film has its audience, because the X factor that no film maker can ever pre-plan or prepare for is the intersection of that work with the person's life, the person watching it. So as we come and sit and watch a film or a TV show, whatever, we're bringing our biases, our lives, our worldviews, our experiences. And if the film meets us at that point, we're in. If it doesn't meet us, it's often harder for us to connect to it and all that. But this kind of work, shamanic cinema, is more so in that it's there's this concept in shamanism called a talisman. And a talisman is something, an object, or that is designed to be transformative for a select experience, for a select person. It's like, and so this film is speaking to a person who's prepared for it. So as you pointed out, Jonathan, the generation raised on the internet, their consciousness is already used to this hypertext, hyper shifting reality field. So they're more prepared to be pulled in. So, and if your life experiences has prepared you in some other way, you could pull in. But if you can't, it's almost like you can't enter it.
Yep. It's also very meta-modern in the academic meta-modern sense, in that it's ping-ponging between absolutely ridiculous absurdity and amazing sincerity. I mean, to me, one of the things I really noticed with this film, especially the second and third time through, the first time, I do think you have to see it more than once, just because the first time it's so much chaos that it's hard to even really stay grounded in the through line. But as you watch it again, you notice how much pain there is through this whole film. For such a film with absurdity and with, the daughter beating the policeman to death with, dildo nunchucks or whatever, as they say, this insane, hot dog fingers and that craziness, and yet that through line of pain and the way she's causing pain to all the different characters without being able to realize it or see it is very clear in this film. That's one of the things that makes it, we say, not only shamanic cinema, but I think it's groundbreaking shamanic cinema, because it's really communicating that the too much, as they frame it. I've heard a quote from the filmmakers where they say what it is to live in the too much all the time, so we're trying to create a language for that. And this film creates that language, and the character of Evelyn is not someone who's in that world until she goes into it, whereas her daughter is already in that world. Yes. So I think that's also a generational difference that's reflected in the characters in the film.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. The groundbreakingness of this film, it's beyond just shamanic cinema, in that it blazes new territory in the cinematic language, especially for integral cinema, as we always talk about. And I think it's important to understand here too. It's asking a very deep question. I mean, it asks a lot of questions, but its central question that is embedded in the language of it itself is, what would happen to a person if they were suddenly able to experience in a lived way, in their whole being, different storylines of their existence,
possible life streams.
What would that do to us? So if the multiverse is real, what would happen if we were suddenly able to access it, not just in a TV screen or something, but in a lived sense, like we could actually feel what it's like to be that person and receive their memories and their everything.
And one of the things I think is brilliant about this film, it's a film about love, ultimately, at its core. Yes. And all these different universes she goes into are ones where she doesn't have love, or she's not able to get love. So the hot dog universe, she's rejecting the advances of the Jamie Lee Curtis character, their relationship, which ultimately she comes to, but because she's still grounded in this universe where Jamie Lee Curtis is the IRS agent, so she's like, I can't do that, Then she goes to the one where she's basically the superstar Michelle Yeoh, and yet she's sacrificed love for that universe. She's become this celebrity, but she doesn't have the family,
There's always something missing.
There's always something missing, exactly.
And what's interesting to me, this is part of the groundbreaking approach here, coming from the question. right, so you take that question of the multiverse and if it's real and if we could access it and all that. And even it goes farther and says, so every choice we make creates a new life stream. So as we go through our lives, actually, it's like, if I make this choice, I go down this path, but then there's an automatic other life stream that's created from that path not followed.
Right.
And so this film is mapping that. It is cinematically taking us into that type of reality field, which I don't think I've ever seen a film attempt it, period, or even, and they've succeeded as far as my experience. I was like, oh my God, they're doing it. They're really taking us, into this wild, and I stream this wild everything everywhere all at once. But I think also your point about this solid through line, her emotional through line, is kind of, it's the hole in the bagel. It's that, the eye of the storm. It's the center that holds her, is this through line of her. And as you point out, every life, every branch of her existence that goes off into these other paths, every branch, every life stream is seeking the same thing: connection and love, in a different way.
Yep. And it's also, I thought there's just something brilliant about making the villain be actually her daughter in one of the other universes, who's this time traveling, because her daughter has just been so overwhelmed by this field of everything and abandoned by the mother in a way. And that the fact that the mother hasn't been able to love her and embrace her, but actually in the one universe, she actually made her that way by experimenting on her. But it's clear that even in this universe, she's still pushing her daughter away by being incapable of giving her love. Like that opening, I've said this before to you many times, the first 15 minutes of the film, I think, are genius. There's so many different threads set up, so much pain throughout. But there's one point where the daughter's girlfriend says, that's how she tells you she loves you, and she says something mean or something like that. And then at the end of that sequence, she goes to her, Joy, what, Mom? And the daughter's standing by the car, and she can't tell her, I love you, it's fine. She's like, you need to look after yourself. You're getting fat. You need to watch what you eat. And she's just like,
and then after she says it, she turns away, and you could see, it's like, she's not only denying the expression of love to her daughter, but she's denying it to herself.
Yeah, her performance is brilliant in that.
Yeah, it's just like, you can see her pain of not being able to actually say that.
Right, but you're seeing the generational trauma, how her feelings of failure are fed to her by her father, who never accepted her, who just got rid of her when she moved to the U.S. with him to be with this.
And that's the trigger. See, in the shamanic frame, there's a primal wound that triggers the journey, the quest. And the father coming to visit opens up her primal wounds. Mm-hmm. And that's when it all starts unraveling. That's when the journey really starts. It's like, and it's really the intersection of her life that she's made for herself with her family, and that old life with the old wounds coming into it. And, so it's beautiful. I mean, it's brilliant all around. It's just amazing.
I mean, watching the film, the way it unfolds, I say that whole opening sequence, which sets up the laundromat, it sets up her snark with the Jenny Slate character, but also how they live upstairs. I mean, I knew the moment I saw the opening with that mirror, where there's that scene in the mirror that the mirror cracks, and now we're into this amazing apartment that's just filled with clutter. You can just feel that sense, that sort of oppressive clutter in there, and how she's got to take care of everything, and it's kind of communicating that he's sort of useless to her because she has to take care of everything, and yet he's got these divorce papers. And then it communicates, does your dad know we're being audited, which is a really nice way of giving that piece of information. And then the daughter, the girlfriend, is like, encouraging her to breathe because she's so triggered by the mother.
It
and then
Waymo
is playing, and then the daughter and the mom are upstairs talking about something, and then you suddenly see this whole other story, which is the first multiverse sign you get where Waymo is actually, doing parkour over the thing and going to do something, and or which we don't see. And so that's just a thing that's being dropped for later among all this other stuff that's being set up, the relationship with the daughter, the relationship with the mother, the relationship with her father, with her husband. And he seems like such a nice guy. And of course, I mean, everyone's talking about what an amazing performance. The husband, gay, I can't remember the actor's name, but, who's kind of an iconic Asian actor as a kid, but what an amazing performance that he came back with. Michelle Yeoh gives this incredible multi-layered performance as all these different characters and trying to come up with this thing, and it's this total failure, just
brilliant. It's, in that opening sequence you're talking about, the first 15 minutes too, there's a lot of subtle cinematic expression as well. He pointed to it a little bit, with the mirror, the round mirror, but also the sound. Like there's a, like you start to feel something else is going on here. This is not just reality. There's like this whooshes as they shift between things.
Yeah, in fact, the first time, there's that every time he changes to a different character, but that happens first at the beginning.
Yes.
When she's working on the IRS, with all the paperwork and stuff.
She's not listening. She's in her own reality field, and he's crashing into it, which again, it's setting up this whole dynamic. So this is not just a play about this thing. This is like the sound and the image and the characters, and it's all integrated. And it's all expressed. It's complex synchronization of the senses.
Yeah, it's complex, right, which is basically where they're using all of the different tools of the cinematic language, which is the sound, the image, the text, which is, all the things that are happening, and also the temporal structuring, how time has worked. And so it's using all of those to communicate all these different layers of the story all at once. It's everything everywhere all at once. It's extremely advanced use of cinematic language and use of...
Yeah, and now we should talk about that just real quick in terms of what does that mean? In terms of, okay, so as the cinema has evolved, as the moving image has evolved, it slowly advances in terms of what it can do with the with the image and the sound and all that, and filmmakers experiment more and more, and for example, the time we talk about in the beginning of cinema, it was you had to show everything. You have to show a character. If somebody was switching to someone else's house, you have to show the whole thing.
Leave, get in the car, go up and drive, get out of the car.
And over time, we've been able to communicate now to such an extent, so fast, so many different images, that the fact that this film was so successful indicates that there is a large percentage of the population or the movie population that are able to follow that. And in the cinema, there's been breakthrough moments where the language has shifted into the popular field. And if we look back, you could see it happening in '99 with The Matrix and The Sixth Sense. They took us to a whole nother level.
Yeah, I've made the case. I think this film is going to be like the Citizen Kane of its time, that it's going to have that much impact on the cinema going forward. And it's a bold claim, not one I could know.
That's another integral film that shifted the cinematic. It lifted the cinematic language further.
Right, we were talking about that. Citizen Kane, it's kind of this deep dive into his life. You go really into it, but then the very end, the closing image, gives you an entire shifted perspective of what it's all about, and you realize that, in a way, it's a film about love, or the lack of love, and the lack of connection. We've talked a lot about integral versus, rational, pluralistic, integral. A lot of people think this is a pluralistic postmodern film because it kind of deconstructs everything and depicts absolutely everything and throws them all together. But what makes it transcend the typical postmodern is that it has a higher perspectival field. It's not just saying everything is given equal weight. In fact, part of her journey at the end, like when she wakes up in the movie theater and says, "Where's our daughter?" and she runs out because now she's actually starting to get grounded in her actual reality. So I think I made the case there's a reading of this film that you could make, which is that the whole thing is just kind of in her imagination, that it's almost like a dream, that her shamanic journey, like a psychedelic journey, like you take a psychedelic, you go through a crazy journey, and you come back with a new understanding of where you are without actually going to other universes. And you can certainly have that reading because she gets more and more chaotic, jumps through all these universes trying to make her way back. And finally, when she makes her way back, that's when she has a real encounter with her daughter and is able to speak with her daughter. Her daughter is able to speak with her. And the daughter's like, "Mom, it's great that you're figuring out your shit. I'm happy for you, but you're driving me crazy. This is like, your insanity is driving me crazy." So it actually really brings it all back in a very solid way back to what the whole movie is really about, you know,
Yeah.
and her understanding
also,
that she's blessed to have that husband and that daughter.
and also one of the things about that is a difference between postmodern and integral is that it can have all this deconstruction, but both of them, you know, have the deconstruction, but the integral will bring the pieces together in the end and give you the deeper and higher kind of frame to hold everything in. And what you were talking about there is that deeper frame, you know, that it's love. It's this, it comes down to this simple love connection, you know, you know, that love between.
Right. It's not saying that all perspectival fields are equal, that they all deserve, that they're all relative. It's very much coming down on like, no, actually, some perspectives are higher than other perspectives. And she goes through this whole journey in order to gain a higher perspectival field.
But and here's an interesting thing to me, is she goes through, touches these different life streams, and she gets to experience all these different possible choices that she could have made. And the reality that every path had something missing is a very profound cosmocentric reality field awareness. And that is the higher perspective. So the deeper big picture in this is the love and that connection. And the higher cosmocentric big picture is that no matter what path we take in life, it's all about this one thing,
Mm-hmm.
love.
And she
so
actually,
it's talking about love in its deepest personal, interpersonal way, and also in its philosophical, cosmic, existential, cosmic perspective at the same time.
Yep. And I mean, for me, I remember the first time watching it, that whole ending sequence where she learns how to use love, which is Wayman's tool, actually. She learns to use his tool, and she defeats all these enemies on the way to trying to save her daughter up that staircase with love, by helping them, by bringing them together. So and then at the very end, she's going to fight her daughter. She does all these martial arts and then ends up with like open arms ready to hug her, you know. So that's like, she's transcended that. Staggering film to me, just a staggering film. I mean, we could talk about it all day, but I think we've covered kind of some of the major things. I'm sure we can find lots of little details. There's also just the way it just explodes all these like weird sexual things as well. I mean, there's a great sequence there where her daughter is like, as Jobu Tabaki is like ready to fight her and all this stuff. And she says, "Oh, that's why you like girls." And she's like, "Wait a minute, you think that I like girls in your universe because of all this?" You know? So it even throws that perspective too of like, hey, wait a minute, don't pathologize this. This is a very much more straightforward connection, you know? It's just, it does so many amazing things, I thought.
Yeah.
And it's so creative.
And the absurdities are very fascinating, you know, like the hot dog fingers, and, you know, it's when I first saw the hot dog fingers, it was like, whoa,
Yeah,
But
very, very Charlie Kaufman-esque, as somebody said.
yeah, but there is the absurdity is part of it's kind of helps define the universe we're talking about, this multiverse. It's like everything is being played out, from the absurd to the profound.
Right, but
It's
also we like to talk about the evolutionary lens, and this specifically goes back to that. First of all, the hot dog fingers, they actually have this very funny satirical scene from 2001, but which also explains how that happened in that alternate universe. The monkeys with the giant fingers were able to beat to death the last monkey with normal fingers, and so that's how that universe developed. And then for me, one of the most staggering moments is that moment when they're going through all these universes and suddenly they're into the most primal imaginable universe where they're just two rocks, literally the beginning of the evolutionary path. And yet even in that one, there's this sort of transcendent moment.
now you see, that's it. It's like it's expanding this universe, this multiverse, into all of sentience, and even rocks are sentient. I mean, it's like sentience
That,
is everywhere.
that moment blew me away. I was like, wow, I can't believe how many things this is doing and how sophisticated it is. And yeah, I mean, the first time through, it's so much that it feels like it kind of goes on for a long time. And the other thing that's impressive from a cinematic standpoint to me is that this is actually kind of a low budget film. I mean, not low budget like $20,000, but they made the thing for like $30 million, which it doesn't look like it. It looks like a big studio film, but it's mostly in this one office building and a couple other little locations, that, the theater and stuff. But there's so many beautiful moments. The moment when Waymo, in the sort of Wong Kar-wai, sort of beautiful, gauzy, romantic one where she's the superstar, where he says, well, you think that I don't fight, but I actually fight with love, basically, he says. And
It's a beautiful moment.
and also when he says, if I had, in another universe where I was in a failing laundromat with you doing taxes, I would have been very happy with that, So he's the one who knows that perspective that she doesn't get yet, And then finally she's able to transcend her fathers and explain her.
That's the teaching. That's the shamanic teaching. There's
throughout
so many moments like that where she's getting the transmission, the Shaktipat, throughout.
It's an amazing, staggering work, and you should watch it 3 or 4 more times probably to really start to understand all these streams that are running through it, how constant and consistent they are. And so anyway,
and you want to talk a little bit real quick as we end about why we're putting this out now?
Oh yes. Well, I was kind of noticing, we were kind of questioning whether this is likely to win any awards, and I'm happy to say that I know Michelle Yeoh has, at this time of this recording, won the Film Critics Award for Best Actress from New York Film Critics, and I think Kei Hui, the one who plays her husband, he won the Best Actor from the Philadelphia Film Critics Award. So some of the critics are liking it. As far as whether the Academy Awards are going to honor it, I'd love to see Michelle Yeoh win. I have a feeling Cate Blanchett's going to win for Tar, which was also an incredible film in my opinion, and she's amazing in it.
Great performance.
And it's a great performance, and it's a very much more maybe accessible to more Oscar voters, although, you can talk politically about why Michelle Yeoh is a middle-aged Asian woman could likely win, and Cate Blanchett's already won a couple of Oscars, so there's political reasons. But
well, that's also a groundbreaking kind of frame here, is this, the star of this film is a, older Asian woman.
Yeah, and I mean, part of the backstory is this film was actually written for Jackie Chan. He was supposed to be the star, and it would have been Jackie Chan and I guess his wife, but in this case, I guess Jackie Chan wasn't able to do it, and they got Michelle Yeoh, which turned out 1,000 times more interesting, I think, probably. I mean, I'm sure Jackie Chan would have been great. It would have been a very different film, though. So it was just a stroke of luck that Michelle Yeoh got to play this. So it's groundbreaking in that way, too, because there aren't that many great roles like this for, a middle-aged Asian woman in American cinema, And I knew this was something special also. I think I told you I talked to a friend of mine who's like maybe around 20. I think he's in college. an Asian American and very similar. And he said, "Oh, I've seen it 3 times." I was like, "Wow." And this was, many months ago when it was still in the theater, and he had seen it 3 times, which meant that it really resonated for him. And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then we read this beautiful review from Walter Chaw, who said, "I didn't realize my parents' story was a love story until I saw this film, and it made me understand that my parents' story was a love story." And we will link to that one. And then also this beautiful cinematic essay from Thomas Flight called, I think, "The Terror of Everything, Everywhere, All at Once." I'll put a link to that as well, where he kind of really groks this idea that everything everywhere all at once is we're living in this environment, and this film is the first film to really communicate that and create a language for that. So on all of those, both brilliant, and we're huge fans of the film. We hope you'll see it again. And
if I could give it 10 thumbs up, I would.
Exactly. 20 thumbs up.
Hot dog.
Much bigger thumbs up than a normal thumbs up. Hot dog thumbs up. Like that's thumbs up. All right. Thank you very much, all of you, for watching. We hope you found this a little bit illuminating, and hopefully you'll join us for the next podcast. Whatever we talk about, we'll see. But in the meantime, stay well, stay safe. Peace.
Stay away, and peace.